Hello and good afternoon to you, wherever you're social distancing, and welcome to this webinar on resilience. I'm Matt. I'm just going to be moderating the discussion today. I'm going to pass you over in a second, but I just want to go over a couple of quick ground rules, which is if you have a question that you would like to ask, please pop it into the chat box. You can see the question feed on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you wouldn't mind, upvote the questions that you want answered the most, so that we will try to get through as many as we can at the end of the session, but we will start with the ones that are the most popular. And the other little rule is I know everybody at the moment is struggling with the job hunt and things are, it's a tricky time. But try to keep the questions fairly broad if you can. We're here to help as many people as possible. So I know your personal situations, maybe, it's very, very important to you, but try to keep the question as applicable to other people as you can. Just help everybody out at the moment. I'm going to hand you over to Emma Jenkins, who is the Student Recruitment Officer at KPMG. Maybe, Emma, if you could just tell us a little bit about KPMG and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. So as Matt said, my name is Emma Jenkins and my job title is Student Recruitment Officer for KPMG. So what that essentially means is I look after everything from advertising all of our undergraduate, graduate and apprenticeship opportunities with KPMG. So usually we'd be out on campus meeting all of your students face to face, but in current times, a lot of virtual events, which is great. More opportunity for you guys to log on and speak to us in any formats that we have on there. Right the way through from advertising our roles and getting people to know about who we are as a company, right the way through to the offer. So we look after the full recruitment process and all of the stages in between. A bit about KPMG and who we are as a firm. So we are what's called professional services. Now, this is quite a broad term, I guess, but it's broad because a lot of the services we offer are broad as well. Best way I describe it is if a client or another company require expertise or assistance in any area of business, we're likely to have a business area that can help them with that. We generalize a lot of our areas into particular stream headings. So audit is our largest area, looking at accounts and finances to make sure they're true, accurate and fair. We also have others a bit more self-explanatory, I guess: tax advisory, technology and engineering, consultancy and all areas that fall under that. Deal advisory and legal as well. So lots of different business areas that we offer to our clients and companies we work with, but also lots of opportunities for undergraduates or graduates to come in and start their career with us. In terms of our opportunities, just to give a really brief overview, we have apprenticeships if you're coming straight from A-level. For those already at university, we have 3-day insight programs for first-year students. We have summer internships and 1-year placements for those in their penultimate year, and then 3-year graduate schemes for people that are in final year or already graduated. And all of those lead on to hopefully great things with KPMG.
Thank you very much. And we're here to talk about Resilience Day, which is obviously an incredibly timely topic, yes, given what we're going through. I'm going to hand it over to you if you just want to take it away, and I think you've got a little presentation to give us, if I'm not mistaken.
I have, yeah. No, I'm happy to share that now. Let me see if technology's on my side today. All right. Okay. Let me know if you've got that full screen or my notes page.
That all looks good.
Excellent. All right. So the topic today is resilience, and what we're going to be going through is what resilience actually is, why it's important in our career and in our personal lives as well as in our professional lives. And then we've actually got 3 main pillars to really help you develop resilience. Some people initially think it's something you're born with, or you sort of have the knack for it, or you don't. That's not the case. There are really great approaches out there that can help you develop the resilience that you need within your career. So let's see if I can move on to the next slide. Matt, all good your side?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, that all looks good here.
Excellent, perfect, brilliant. So starting off with what resilience actually is. So simply put, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So if you think about challenges or problems that you might face, it's how you are able to overcome those and become back to the pre-crisis status, as the second point says there. So being able to cope with that in terms of your workload and going back to that point that you were before the issue happened, but also being able to mentally and emotionally cope with that change as well. It's really important in personal lives as well as in our professional lives, in that challenges will come up all the time, and we need to make sure that you'll stay motivated, and that you have the ability to cope with that even when you could be under quite a lot of pressure. So it's just thinking about how you can overcome those, make sure you're still emotionally stable within that whilst it's happening and those issues, and coming back to a point where you can continue forward after that issue. So why resilience is important overall. I won't elaborate too much on this because it really does explain it from the first point on the screen, but it's being able to develop mechanisms for protection against experiences that could be overwhelming. So like I said, a huge part of this is the emotional aspect of that, and being able to pick yourself back up and move on forward with determination. It's really important to maintain balance in our lives during these stressful periods. Examples could be personal aspects that are going on as well as what's happening in your professional life. I think the pandemic at the moment is a prime example. I think everybody's lives have changed in different ways, and being able to stay resilient has been really important in knowing that for working from home, for example, you've still got to maintain professional and complete your job role, but you also have your own personal lives and that could be going through quite a stressful period due to what's happening at the moment across the world. So it's being able to maintain that balance. And then also it's a really important way of improving our learning and achievement as well. Without making those mistakes, we don't necessarily know how we could be improving in the future. So I mentioned there were going to be 3 topics and 3 key approaches to developing this resilience. And they are emotional balance, self-management, and social integration. If you're going to take down any notes, take down these headers. Hopefully there'll be a couple of learnings throughout each of these 3 sections that will help you when you do face a crisis, and also being able to change your mental attitude towards them as well, along with actual approaches and methods that you can use within each of these 3 areas. So we'll start off with emotional balance. Now, there are some quotes on the screen. What I'd like you to do is just read through some of these and think about whether you agree or disagree with them. So just reading some of them out. I try to avoid mistakes at all costs. Making mistakes shows me that I'm not a top student. I feel uncomfortable when I get something wrong. Or people who excel in a particular area, such as maths, are good at it and it comes naturally to them. So a couple of different quotes on the screen. Think about whether you agree or disagree. It's okay to be either end. You might be really far one end that you strongly agree with this quote and that really aligns to you as a person. You might be somewhere in the middle, somewhere down at the other end of disagree. So just thinking about those quotes, we'll come back to them in a moment, but research has shown that mistakes are really important opportunities for us to learn and grow as people. But it's quite common that students quite routinely regard mistakes as indicators of low ability, or something that they're not as good at something because they keep making mistakes in these certain areas. Now, when students think about the why something is wrong, then these new synaptic connections are made in the brain. So they are sparked from these why is something wrong, and it causes the brain to grow. So essentially, this suggests that we should actually value these mistakes and move from them, viewing them as learning failures as well. So they're opportunities for us to learn, why is it that that mistake was made in the first place? Why was that hurdle or something that we couldn't quite get over at the time? Looking at the neuroscience that's involved, there's evidence to suggest that how we react to certain mistakes or issues should really be applied to help us learn more effectively as well. So if we have the mentality that fear and mistakes are bad and they should be avoided at all costs, then that's not going to help us open up to learning opportunities. So there's evidence that a mistake-rich environment is actually preferable. It produces better education, it leads to more insight and sometimes truth as well. Sometimes we might have a certain view or aspect that we expect of how something should be ran. And if it doesn't quite go that way, that doesn't mean to say that it was your error. It might have been the case that that wasn't supposed to go that way. So it's a learning of how things should be done maybe in the future. So really you just want to think that these mistakes are expected, and essentially you want to turn those mistakes into information. If we think about KPMG, for example, we bring students in from all degree backgrounds, from all levels of education, from all levels of understanding or experiences in industries. So if we're bringing people in from all different ranges and expect you to have no experience, knowledge, or education, then how can we expect you not to make mistakes? We can't. So because of this, it's really important to think about your emotional balance, turning those mistakes into a learning experience. And in recruitment processes, for example, show us that you can bounce back when plans didn't quite go how you initially expected. So if we look back to some of these points now, maybe looking at some of those quotes, have a think about, okay, you might have initially thought you really strongly agree with some of those. Think about widening that view. I feel uncomfortable when I get something wrong. Really big part of resilience is learning, okay, how do I make myself comfortable and think, yes, it's a challenge, but I'm going to overcome it. All right. Next slide might raise some eyebrows, I think, and raise a couple of questions. Why on earth do we have WD-40 on the screen about resilience? I mean, something that you might not know is that WD-40 is a best-selling product. However, the way that it's got its name, that it actually took 39 attempts to make the correct formula. So that means there have been 39 failed attempts at creating the correct formula. However, because they persevered, they were resilient, they kept going and going over those hurdles every time they had one, they've now ultimately got a really successful product. So those fails have led to one of the market leaders at the moment. If you think about resilience with that, if they gave up on the 35th, 36th, 37th, 38th, 39th attempt, then they wouldn't have got to the position they're in today. So it's really important to bounce back as soon as you do come across those hurdles. Okay, so we've got a quote on the screen just to think about. The important thing is to put the hours in and just get on with it. Feelings about my workload or my own potential don't come into it at the end of the day. So just thinking about that quote, again, some of you might agree with it, some of you might disagree, you might be somewhere on the scale, there might be elements that you think you agree with. Now, relating to this, there's two other areas. There's a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset. Now, a fixed mindset is somebody that says, I'm not good at this, I find it too difficult, and it's quite closed off in your way of thinking. Now, this can actually limit your potential for success. What you want to aim towards is having a growth mindset. So this is where you don't see your abilities as fixed. So you welcome problems and difficulties as a way of learning, and really they increase your potential for success. So there's evidence to say that students that are praised for the effort that they put into a task or how they've responded to a certain challenge are actually more resilient and more successful compared to others that are praised for just being good at it per se, where you think it just comes naturally to them. So they say that there's actually further success in careers and more resilience built from actually coming against those issues and those problems. Now, the implications of these mindsets is that students with a growth mindset are able to learn more effectively. So there's a desire for challenge and wanting to push yourself and push your boundaries. And with that comes resilience when you're in the face of failure. The fixed mindset, it's the opposite. It's you believe you're either smart or you're not. You've either got it or you don't. With students of those fixed mindsets, and when they see a mistake, It's thinking, okay, I'm not smart enough, I give up. And that's it, done with. That's that fixed mindset. You want to make sure you're aiming for that growth mindset. Thinking about this statement and thinking about where you might agree with it, disagree with it, not sure where it comes into it. It's those with a growth mindset that can actually look at this and say, no, actually, that's not the case. Yes, it's important to get on with your work and do well and put the effort in and those hours in, but it's not the be all and end all. The feelings about it and your potential within a role are just as important as getting the job done first time round. If you do make mistakes and there are errors and issues that come up, that's okay. It's all part of learning. It develops you as a person. It's going to increase your potential. So yeah, you might just think this quote isn't quite exactly how you initially thought of it. All right, so that is the emotional balance section. Next, we're going to be moving on to self-management. So self-management is it's about an individual taking the opportunity to use application services, as it says on here, but different ways of working together to make sure that you can balance both your emotions and your workload. So it's the self-management of those two areas. So on the screen, we've got a couple of examples of what resources and application services there are available to you to help you with that balance. So it's a really important skill that comes within resilience. A resilient person is being able to manage a crisis that's in one part of their life without it affecting other areas of their life. Now, thinking of it in a more proactive way, actually people that are really strongly resilient is that they know how to use unaffected parts of their life to help them overcome the crisis, or at least being able to give some sort of compensation, I guess, towards the issue you're having in one area of your life. So we've got some examples on the screen there. I think the first ones that come to account is friendships and family that you have. It's quite often people that we turn to when we find ourselves in a difficult situation, and they're there for that emotional support more so than anything. Some of the others on the screen are there for more of the professional support as well. So university support you might have. This webinar is a great example. In that it's giving you the tools to be able to self-manage when those experiences come up. When you start in a firm, of course, there's going to be supportive staff. There might be managers, line managers. At KPMG, we have performance managers as well that look after your development and your well-being within the firm. Lots of different of people support, I guess, to help you manage those crises. Some other examples on the screen are a bit more about, I think they link closely with the emotional balance as well. So looking at routine, exercise, getting enough sleep, having organisation and planning within your day and knowing what you're setting yourself out to do. Quite often a lot of that can just help us bring down the level, I guess, of stress that might be involved when we are thinking about times of challenge. So we just need to remember that it's okay to be down from time to time. It's okay to be stressed and feel like you're stretched in different areas. It's totally natural, but it's really important to think, okay, let's bring this back to the key points. What is it I have to overcome? What is it that I have to achieve here? And using all of the supports that you've got to help you self-manage that. Now, a point that we probably don't initially think of it because it's exactly what it is on the tin. It's automatic thoughts. So these can either be positive or negative. But I just want to touch on some of the negative automatic thoughts because this does crop up quite often when we come in times of challenge. They're really important in making sure that we can turn any sort of situation and bring it back to what the actual issue is, like I was saying on the previous slide. Examples of these automatic negative thoughts are on the screen. So personalizing, thinking that what other people say is always related to you or it's a reaction into what you've done, which might not always be the case. Comparing ourselves to others. So if somebody else has been complimented on a piece of work that they've done, you're then instantly comparing yourself to that and thinking, oh, I'm not as capable, or I'm not as that level, or have as much expertise as that person. That criticism and that comparing can be quite a negative thought. Blaming as well. So blaming ourselves even if you've not done anything wrong. But also on the flip side of that, holding other people responsible for our pain or the issues that we're coming across, and seeing ourselves as victims. Catastrophizing, thinking the worst case scenario. It's quite easy to do this, and I think a lot of people naturally do this as well. Overestimating and thinking that the likelihood of what's going to happen is going to be far worse than in reality it's probably going to be. And with that, I guess, underestimating what it is that we're able to cope with as well. So thinking of the extreme. And then the final one is overgeneralizing. So you've got one example of a situation you're in at the time, but in your head you're thinking, oh, it's always going to be like this, or I'm never going to reach the career point I want to. So overgeneralizing on those points. So what we're going to look at on the next slide is thinking about these automatic negative thoughts, realizing what they are, and using a method called the RRR method to flip that round into a positive action. So the RRR method, record, rationalize, and replace. So the goal with this is to think about those automatic negative thoughts that we have. First point being record. So whether you want to write this down when you are facing a challenging time, write down all of the thoughts that you had in reaction to that event, trying to catch those negative thoughts, I guess, to make sure that we can examine them and challenge those initial thoughts that we have. A good exercise is to physically write them down or type them out if you want to, thinking at the time it's just happened, this is how I'm feeling, it's too much to handle. Slow down with it, record and write down what it is the situation is and how you're feeling at that time. If you don't want to do the writing down, we can sort of change this around to recognize, at least as long as you're recognizing those negative thoughts, then you can think about how to turn them around. Rationalize is the next point, which is essentially thinking, okay, which is the negative thought that I'm using here? Some of those on the previous slide, there are additional ones to that as well. Rationalize it and think, catastrophizing, for example, is this really going to spiral into the absolute worst case scenario? Probably not. You can probably catch it much sooner than it actually is. So rationalizing your thoughts that you've got around that. And then the final R is replace. So eventually we want to be able to learn to replace these negative thoughts. A really helpful tool that tends to help a lot of people is thinking about what you'd say to a friend. You know, a lot of people tend to say, do as I say, not as I do. But this is a prime example of that. If a friend comes to you with a problem or an issue they're having, most of you will have great advice to give to them. Now think about that advice and put it into that circumstance that you're having and the issue that you've got at the time. The more you practice this method and noticing these thoughts earlier on, then the more you'll be able to create those effective changes. And all of that is a part of resilience. It's being able to spot the issue in, first of all, have that emotional balance and making sure that you can recognize what it is and it's not as big as an issue as you probably think it is. Being able to self-manage using all of those different elements to cope and to balance each other off, to making sure they don't impact on each other. And effectively, you'll come out the other end as if you were before the crisis happened. All right, final part is social integration. Now, some of you might be thinking, how on earth can we do this now? We're not face-to-face for a lot of the things that we're doing. But what's important is utilising social networks. And the fact that we're doing this webinar today virtually shows that actually it doesn't matter that they're not face-to-face. You can still use all of your support networks during this time. So we've got examples on the screen of what you can use for that social integration piece. The previous piece about self-management was more about resources that you can use to help self-manage. these are examples where you can help them manage the situation with you. So initial ones that I think a lot of people would think of: friends, family, colleagues, within the firms. Before you join with KPMG and once you started, we do have a buddying system, so like a mentor system that you have. There'll be teammates that you can bounce ideas off. There'll be managers. Like I said, we have line managers as well as people managers. If you think about your current circumstances at university, maybe lecturers or teachers that you've got, a really great one to consider when you're thinking about your career is the careers service. All universities have one. A lot of schools as well will quite often have a careers point of call as well, and it's their job to help you progress in your career and direct you into the right path. Now, if you think you're having issues with, let's say, interviews, you're really struggling with them and you're just not quite getting the knack of them, and you can't quite see why you can't overcome this hurdle, careers service are a great example. They'll be able to give you hints and tips to manage that situation and to help you prepare beforehand. And all of this is about resilience. Think about it. You're having these initial issues. You're finding ways to overcome the problem with that positive attitude, thinking, I will get there one day, and then flip onto the other side of it, hopefully with that support, you'll be in a job role with a job offer. Couple of other points on the slide, thinking about online groups or online communities as well. So I know on Facebook, for example, there's communities for all sorts of people. A couple of team members of mine, they are parents and they have been struggling quite a lot managing their young children whilst working full-time from home. And they've got online support groups on Facebook where they can all reach out to each other, give them best practice, find ways of coping, and feeding into that self-management, I guess. The final three on the right-hand side are more KPMG specific ones. So there is a PQA team, which is a professional qualifications and accreditation team. Essentially, they are a team that's set up specifically to help you pass your exams and studying as part of the graduate schemes you join with us. So we're investing time, money and effort into you joining us and to complete these professional qualifications. We want to give you that support whilst you're going through the study and exams. So this is a specific team just for that purpose. And it's a great example where if you're having issues with your studying or some of the exams, you're really struggling, there's a support network there for you. Societies is another one which you can relate to at university, but also within KPMG, we have what are called networks. So very similar. We have a Black Heritage, we have LGBTQ+, we have a network of women, we have all different faiths as well. We have sports, everything you can think of, we'll have a network there to help represent you in the firm. And they're a great way for you to bounce your problems off. I mentioned before about my colleagues with young children. There is a network that's built for parents that are working from home, and they're all there to help support you in your professional role or in your personal life as well. Final point is well-being resources as well. So for us in the firm, we have a platform that we can use called Be Well, which is a 24/7 counselling service, which all KPMG's employees have access to. And I'm sure within universities, within your local networks, there are other well-being resources out there to help you as well, just to help you manage what situations you're in. Okay. That's just thinking a bit about why social integration is important, looking at resilience. So thinking about how resilient we are is just as much to do with the social environment that we're in, as well as the circle of support that we have to help build those personal strengths. So that circle of support is part of this social integration, thinking about who it is that we can rely on when we need them. So there's a little quote there from Elliot Friedman just saying, the availability of social support in all its forms, so instrumental support, emotional support, and support with how you think about things, they all matter in helping us facing challenges. And I guess what's important here is thinking about that with relationships that we have, there can be different elements of support that we get from them. Instrumental support, so being within the workplace, it might be you don't have the knowledge, or you might have a task that you've never done before and you need that support to teach you how to do so. Emotional support, sometimes it's just being able to offload onto somebody and having somebody there to hear that you can love and trust sometimes if it's somebody close to you. And also the support about how you think about things, so giving you coping mechanisms, that RRR method that we mentioned earlier, giving you different ways to cope when you do face those challenges. Okay, that is actually our final slide. So on the slide, I'll just keep this up for a brief time before we move on to questions. But from myself at KPMG, we do have different routes where you can get in contact with us. They're on the screen, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have email addresses, a central number to call. You'll find all of it on the website. So more than happy for you to head there if you've got anything you either want to follow up with in terms of our specific routes and opportunities that are available, or if you want to link in about specific questions of this this session. If we don't have time to answer them today, feel free to link in with us there. All right.
Thank you so much for that, Emma. We'll try and put that slide up again at the end of the webinar,
Sure.
if that's okay for you, just so people know where they can go. And thank you for that, because that's absolutely a phenomenal trip through. I mean, developmental psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, all sorts of things in there that are really, really useful. And you know, particularly at the moment with everything that's going on, how you deal with failure and or making mistakes is really a key one. I mean, I think I saw a study fairly recently which said something similar. You forget how much your development through university and through school actually affects how you deal with
Absolutely.
mistakes. I think they found that children who play a lot of games, whether that's sports, like being part of a football team, or whether they've got a Dungeons and Dragons group or something like that, they tend to learn from failure more often because they experience it, so they handle it a lot better and they put the processes in place. But it's really an interesting topic. Thank you very much for sharing that.
No problem at all. I hope it helps people.
I think we can dip into some of these questions, because the list is growing in a very much a good way. The first one we have is how to talk about mistakes at interview. Would you have any tips on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I'll just relate back to an interview technique first of all, is the STAR method. So situation, task, action, and result. That's how you should structure all of your answers at interview. Really, it's a great way to structure your answer to make sure that the interviewer understands the whole picture. I think sometimes when we're talking about something specific, you can ramble on and forget that you've actually told them, oh, sorry, this is a piece of work I was doing a few months back around this. So having that structure first of all. Thinking about mistakes, I think it's really important to totally hold your hands up and own up to it sometimes. It shows integrity, which is really important within so many firms, in that you can recognize when a mistake has been made. So I think first of all, within that situation and that task, sort of saying, here, this is what was going ahead. I made the error of X, Y, and Z. Now, what's important to bring back from that is thinking, I understand the reason I made that mistake was because of X, Y, and Z. So that reflective piece, I think, demonstrating that you're already aware of the mistake itself. You've got the integrity to own up to it and hands up, I made an error here. But then understanding, I need to overcome that and I would do things differently next time. And also how you would do those things differently, and how you found that out as well. It might be through feedback. It might be asking other people, what do you think with that piece of work that I did? How could I have improved? So using all of those resources, and being able to say, next time, I know I'd do things differently with X, Y, and Z. Hope that helps.
It's showing that you've learned from it, I think, is really the key. Definitely. The key one in terms of resilience. I just want to say that there is an article on Target Jobs that I've got open in front of me, but I don't think I can share it over the link over the chat. Called How to Answer Typical Competency-Based Interview Questions. For those of you out there, if you want to put that into Google, there's a little bit more about the STAR method and what that involves, and hopefully that'll help you when you come to the interview stages.
Absolutely. I'll just build on that in that quite often an interview question could be, what do you think the challenges of the role are? And I think people really struggle with that because you're sort of owning up to what you're not so good at, which doesn't feel natural, I think, to us. But again, it's the same scenario. Having that self-awareness, knowing that there are issues or challenges that I'm going to have in this role, but having that resilience to go, I know that, but it's okay. I've got that positive attitude and I'm going to overcome it with all of these different routes and methods that I've got.
And it's showing the examples of when you've done it in the past. So when this
Absolutely.
happened
Yeah.
to me last time, this is what I went through, and this is what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do it that way again. I changed
Yeah.
this, I changed that.
And the outcome of it as well. Tell us the outcome. Don't just say what you've done. Tell us it was a success in the end. I learned from it. I know that next time I'll be doing things in a slightly different way. So the full outcome from those as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is an interesting one. How do you show a growth mindset, especially with intangible skills during an interview?
Sure. I think a great way is thinking about limitations. So questions might be around a time when you've had to be innovative, maybe, or a time when you've had to leverage technology and using technology in a piece of work that you were doing, say. And I think that growth mindset is thinking not just the route that you put in place was the right choice, the fact that you've thought about other options as well, you've considered them, you've whittled them down because they weren't quite adequate for the purpose. But having that wider viewpoint of understanding there are other areas outside of that. But also with whichever example you have, discussing the limitations that were in place as well, or the challenges or the issues that you were going to face in that scenario. Sometimes with questions such as about delivering quality, for example, it's so natural for us to say, we had this situation, it was great, I did all of these things, it was fantastic, and it was a great success, over and done with. Well, actually, we need you to have the bigger picture mindset and thinking, I understand there were issues here, there, and the other. There were limitations involved, but we overcome those. So I think that's the difference there with the interview style questions with that growth mindset.
Thank you. And I mean, the growth mindset, as you say, when you're referring to new technology, it's looking at the traditional way that something would have been done versus the new way that you did it. And there will probably be things that have gone wrong with it. And that's where you start to say where you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully with what's happening now and what we're all having to go through, I'm sure many of you have different examples of that where you've had to find new ways of doing things. But yeah, being able to speak about the limitations, understanding how you've come to that final decision, I think is important.
Thank you. So this is one that I think we mentioned we thought might come up before we came on the stream. How do we demonstrate resiliency in a CV or at interview?
Sure. CV is an interesting one. I mean, for our process, we don't ask for CVs, we ask for application forms. So anything I say is just my personal opinion, I guess, on CVs from that point. But I think quite often resilience doesn't always come up within a CV point of view. The reason being is it's more of an overview snapshot of you as a person, your education, your experiences. And I think in there, it's sort of a sales piece in itself, in a quick snapshot saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm good for within the role. I don't think resilience would necessarily come into that in the sense that you are having to own up to issues or challenges that you've had. So in terms of summarizing within a CV, I don't think you should try and specify resilience pieces within all of your examples. However, if you have a great example where there was a huge issue and you overcome that, think about the outcome that you've had, and you can always put in there despite challenges of becoming virtual, for example, whatever that challenge was, you can always put a little line in there, despite this situation, came out with this positive outcome. In terms of an interview, hopefully we've covered some points there already, but being able to recognize the issue first of all, recognize with your self-awareness and owning up to it, I guess, holding your hands up. Think about the techniques that you used to overcome that, how you came to decide of those techniques and which support networks you've used to help come to that, and then the final outcome and reflections from that piece as well.
Thank you. And I mean, as you say, the CV is just a snapshot, but you may get that as a covering letter, or if it's specifically asked on an
Sure.
application form. And I know when we're talking about this, we've said this before, but everybody is going to be different. It is going to be a very, very subjective thing to you. You know, some people will, their resiliency could be, fighting the wildfires in California, and for some people it will just be coping with lockdown, because this,
Absolutely.
everybody is going to be affected differently.
Absolutely. And I think when people are reviewing that, I mean, from a recruiter's point of view or interviewer's point of view, we're not looking for the hardest, most challenging thing in the world. You know, you've not fought in the war or something crazy where, you've really got to have that resilience. It's not about how extreme the situation might sound. It's about how you're coping with it and how you overcame it.
Exactly. Thank you. So we have a question in. I think we've had a few of these, so I wanted to tackle this one because I can see several different iterations of it, and it's very specific to KPMG. Are there any other particular skills that KPMG looks for in a graduate? And I'll tag on to that, because there are a few questions about the types of degree that KPMG look for when you're
Sure.
applying. There's people saying, is it only finance? Can you be from a politics or humanities background? So I think if we tackle that together.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So I'll give a sort of an overview. In terms of the degree discipline that you're studying, for the majority of our roles, they can be any degree discipline. There are a small handful of roles where we ask for a STEM background, for example, but that will all specify in the job spec. Huge majority of them can be from any degree background. So whilst those within, say, accounting and finance might know more about us and are likely to apply for us as a firm, that doesn't mean to say that we take any preference of them. We essentially don't look at that information if we don't need to. If the role that you're applying for is one of those where you can come from any background, we don't even consider it as part of the process. In terms of the areas that we assess against throughout, resilience is one of them. We have changed our process in that we don't look for competencies, but we look for strengths. So as our roles, we expect you to have no experience. We expect you to have no knowledge or like I say, from any degree background. So what's important to us is to make sure that you could manage if you came into our roles. Those strengths are what we look for. We've got them on the website. I don't know if we can add them into the comments maybe later, Matt, but within the website, there's an area under applying for KPMG, and there's an area in there saying, is KPMG right for me? Within there are 11 strengths, and it's these 11 strengths that we assess against throughout the whole recruitment process. So that's from the first online application through to the second and through to the virtual launchpad that we have as a final stage. Every element of that is assessed against these 11 strengths. I won't go into too much detail with all of them, but some from the top of my head. Career motivation is a huge one, and it plays a really important part. With career motivation, we want to find out why you are applying for KPMG specifically. A lot of people will give the answer, you're an international firm, great opportunity with different clients, part of the Big Four, but they're still quite general and broad and could apply to other companies. Why is it you want KPMG specifically? That's really important. Think about our values, think about some of the work we might be doing, maybe some of the corporate responsibility work that we do. Anything that you've learned today by speaking to me on this webinar, add it in. It's all specific to us as a firm. A lot of the other ones are quite broad, I guess, and something that you can find in your personal life as well as in your professional life. So leveraging technology is becoming a huge importance as we move forward, I guess, and that's one of the strengths that we assess against. Fostering innovation, so finding new ways of tackling issues. Like I say, resilience is one of them. Being a credible connector, so how you build those relationships with people from the outset. Thinking about it when you are in the firm, it's going to be team members of your new team, it's going to be your line manager, it's going to be other graduates, but it's also going to be clients. You will be facing clients, and I promise you from day dot, you'll be responsible to work with those clients and lead some of those meetings or projects. You're not there to to make cups of tea and photocopy. You're really getting stuck in. So building those relationships from the outset is really important. Like I say, well, I'll leave you to read through all of the rest of them. I've seen somebody has added it into the comments there, which is great. So yeah, those 11 strengths, I recommend printing them out, having them aside of you as you're going through the recruitment process. And for the interview stage, think about examples that you might have for each of those.
That's brilliant, and it's worth just mentioning. That there's a lot of like career motivation. You need to know a lot about what KPMG does, but it's for the person to do. It's why it interests you. Is what
Absolutely.
people. It's specific to the candidate. So if you're out there listening to this and you're sort of wondering, oh, I don't know about X, Y, or Z, do a skills audit. Go back through your CV. What have I learned from working part-time at a supermarket? What have I learned from having to deal with this personal event? What have I learned? And keep a list of that, and then look at where they fit in on the list on the website that someone's kindly put in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what's really important is that we work with such diverse clients. We work internationally. We work in all different industries, from public sector, private sector, FTSE 350 down to startups. So because our client base is so broad, we need to make sure that our staff are as well, and that they come from such diverse backgrounds. So there would be no benefit to us having these strengths and only looking for one particular type of person. That doesn't benefit us as a firm in the long run. So in order to have that diversity, we want to hear you for you, who you really are. Why is it that you're interested in working for us, and what can you give us within those strengths? So, try and be, I guess, honest with yourself throughout the process. It's just as important that you're the right person for us, but also we're the right job for you. It's just as important. It's with our graduate schemes that they're a permanent position on a 3-year program. It's not for the short haul. If you're not going to enjoy it, then there's no point initially thinking about it as an option. So being true to some of those strengths and thinking about, that role sounds great, something that I'm actually going to enjoy and want to do as part of my career.
Thank you. We have a couple. This is sort of straying a little bit into wellbeing and mental health, and I just want to sort of preface this by saying, if we are not mental health advisors, we are not doctors. If you do have a problem and you need to see someone, go and seek a professional help. Go to your GP or equivalent. But there's a question about resilience. So what about people who have, we talked before actually about, the mindset that you get into. It's either people are naturally good at it, or it's you're learning from everything you do. So it's what about people who have these thoughts, but have them because of mental health problems or because they're neurodivergent? So what would you
Sure. Yeah, I guess just to reiterate, I'm by no means an expert. I work in student recruitment, very different area, I guess. I think my advice there would just be to get any sort of support that you need from that social integration piece we spoke about. Some of those networks that might be available to you will be really important. There might be other people in similar situations to yourself, but bounce off them, find new ways of managing and tackling some of those issues that you might be having. Like I say, within KPMG, all employees have the Be Well service that we have. So free counselling that we have access to, and there's multitudes of places out there that give you that support within counselling areas. So I guess it would be to speak to the experts. They're going to have the areas that have the knowledge, but also I guess the coping mechanisms is the best way to put it, and the ways to change your mindset for some of those situations. So they're going to be best placed to answer.
And if stepping away from KPMG, but please, Emma, do chip in if
Sure.
with specific examples. It depends on how comfortable you are talking about some of these things as well. So a lot of application forms will have something for extenuating circumstances, or will have I can't remember the exact terminology, but when you're reasonable adjustments when you go for application and interview. So if you are comfortable talking about them, it may well show your resilience. But that is down to the individual. It's a very personal thing. I obviously don't want to delve too deeply into that. I'd leave everybody to make their own minds up on that sort of front.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just add that from our point of view, we do accept extenuating circumstances. If there are parts of the entry requirements where you don't quite meet it, but you have those circumstances as to why, then please still apply. There's a little tick box on our application form to say, yes, I've got extenuating circumstances. And from the evidence that we need, it's nothing too in-depth. You don't need to give us too much information. It's more about the educational institute being aware of those circumstances and if any adjustments were put in place at the time. So there's sort of set evidence, I guess, that we can take into account. And also with reasonable adjustments, we can put those in place throughout the full recruitment process for whatever your needs might be. So if you feel comfortable doing so and you want to benefit from adjustments that can be put in place, yeah, definitely, speak up, and I'm sure many other employers as well will be able to help out where they can.
Thanks. Just to add one last thing is, as I said, it does depend on how comfortable you are talking about this sort of thing. I did read one article the other day, and it was a very stereotypical lockdown thing. Someone had started baking, and this person was also suffering from mental health problems, and one of the things was not taking breaks from work, just becoming obsessed and just becoming driven and never stopping. And the baking, because it happened at sort of several hour intervals. The process of starting a project and finishing a project inside a day when your work may go on for months, and the whole timings and the precision of it and everything else had really helped them while lockdown was going on with the working from home thing. I just thought it was an interesting story. It was the kind of thing that said sort of resilience to me. It's someone has found a way to cope with something that could be a substantial problem otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's finding what works for you as well, which different methods. So that sense of, like you say, the control, the end to end within one day's work for that person. It's great. So yeah, definitely reached out to get different coping mechanisms, I guess.
And you've mentioned a little bit about KPMG's programs on well-being. Would you just sort of tell us a little bit about the sort of culture around well-being at KPMG, maybe?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have a network or a society, like I mentioned earlier, called Be Mindful, which is all about well-being within the firm. Essentially, with all of our networks, I'll briefly say, is that you can either join them if you feel like you're part of that network. So let's say for the network of women, for example, but men can join as well, that one, in the sense that you're there just to support or to learn, just to find out more and broaden your understanding. The Be Mindful network is there to support those that do have those mental health issues, or even if they're just struggling a bit and need to find different ways of speaking out, having that support, people to speak to, and also to find out the different resources, I guess, that KPMG offers. So the network is there as a centralized hub, I guess, of everything well-being. Outside of that, there are things that I guess could be specific to certain teams. I mean, my team, for example, have been great during the lockdown period. As soon as it was brought in, work from home from here onwards, we had weekly catch-ups in with senior management just to chat, just to talk about anything we wanted to. And some of them are still going on now if they feel like it's necessary. So the support within the people, I guess, at KPMG is really important in itself, outside of the standard resources and other areas that you can access. I've lost my train of thought. So with some of the check-ins that we're having with management as well, it's just been really great in that they've said, we know it's a busy time, they know there's a lot of change happening, but they're quite happy for us to take a step back and think, what's more important is how we cope through this situation rather than the final outcome, which usually might be the case when you're in the office. And that's been huge in helping all of us, I guess, as staff, being resilient to these times, having that support network there. So yeah, plenty of formalized routes, I guess, the networks, but also just the people that are around you have been really useful.
Never underestimate your colleagues, especially when
absolutely. We still say have a coffee break, which is, yes, it's all virtual. I'm sat in my kitchen as it is, but have that coffee break. It's important.
You haven't moved from the same sofa, or in my case, you haven't moved from the same chair for several days, but we have the coffee break in the same place anyway.
Absolutely.
So we will put up a little bit of information at the end about where people can find more information about graduate programs and internships, because there are people asking, and there are a few questions about visas and qualifications, and I think a lot of these are the sort of things. I'm sorry to the people out there who can't speak back to me on the chat. These are a lot of the things that you will find on the application form and you will find on the specs pages for each individual role. So, please do go and check those out. As I say, we'll put the information up at the end.
Absolutely.
There is an interesting one here because we've talked about a lot of the positives and a lot of the ways to cope with resilience. And there is one that says, what would you say is the most challenging thing about working in the professional services industry? Which I thought was quite a nice way of turning it around.
Interesting. I guess it would depend, and it would differ depending on which business area you're in. So that's a huge part, in that because our services and our clients vary so much, I guess some of the challenges that are involved with that will vary so much as well. I think, speaking from a personal point of view within student recruitment, I think a challenge has been this move to virtual. A huge part of my job was coming out onto university face to face and speaking to as many students as we could. And I feel like sometimes you can connect quickly and a lot more efficiently with students in that way. But having to turn it virtual has been a learning curve for everybody involved, for the students on the opposite end, but also from us actually trying to deliver this information. And I guess that's a turning point for most business areas as well, in that we've not been able to meet clients. Sometimes some sort of work might feel like I just need to be there to see it. I just want to be in front of that screen or speaking to that person to get to the nitty-gritty of what it is you're trying to find out. Whereas we're not able to do that anymore. So we've had to adapt, we've had to change to meet those challenges. And doing so far seems to have been great. We've not any huge hurdles that we've been aware of. We're very lucky in that our IT infrastructure was very set. I worked from home quite frequently before all of this happened, as majority of KPMG staff did. So that aspect has been really smooth sailing. But I think it's just changing the way that we've had to work. If I think about some of the more client-facing areas and some challenges that other graduates have spoken out about in the past, I think a huge point is being able to work with clients. So if I take audit aside, if I think about some of the other business areas where we're more advisory elements, is being able to tell a client something they don't necessarily want to hear. Essentially what your findings are might be the complete opposite of what they expected. Yes, it's a challenge and it's difficult, but that's all part of that character building, in being able to make those relationships work. Having that trust in the first instance is really important, so that when you are delivering those challenging conversations, there's less likely to have backlash, I guess, or pushback from the clients, because they trust that what you're saying is correct. At the end of the day, we're the experts, and you will be if you join us. So that's what they need to trust. So those difficult conversations, I think, can crop up from time to time, but it's all just a learning curve. And some people will talk about others in their team thinking, how do you always have that client on your side? They're always just happy with whatever you say. But a huge part of that is that relationship building that you have. A note just to tally onto that is that working with clients, whether you come in as apprentice, intern, or as a graduate, the client won't know that element of it. They see you as KPMG staff and the expert in the field. It's not like you go into client meetings labeled as the graduate, the trainee, the somebody that's learning on the job. It's not in that view to the client side. So you can really sort of build that trust and that relationship from the first aspect.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to what you said earlier as well, because I know people out there, when you're looking for a job, it feels rough at the moment, because it is difficult to communicate, and maybe there are delays in replies, or it can be all sorts of things. People forget it's a challenge for the recruiters as well. They forget it's a challenge for companies. Everybody has had to adapt this year, and whether that's learning how to not get the silly beach background on Microsoft Teams, or whether it's just connecting with people. Don't forget that, to those who were asking about this, what the challenges are at the moment. The companies, the firms, the employees, everybody is going through something at the moment. That is a big challenge.
Absolutely, and I guess we're all learning. So if you guys ever have feedback on the process or anything that you've been involved with, pass it our way as well, because I guess we're all learning through this time just as much you are as we are.
Thank you. Emma, I'm going to ask you could you put that slide up with the contact for KPMG, if you don't mind? And I just want to say a big thank you to you for sharing that with us, because that really was absolutely fascinating and really, really quite insightful.
Fabulous, no problem. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us on. And like I say, I'm more than happy to answer any follow-up questions, whether it be, I don't know, LinkedIn or email us. That's no problem. I'm happy to help.
That's really kind of you. And just a big thank you to those in the chat who I noticed, so people have been putting in links to Target Jobs and to KPMG, and even to the 3Rs. So thank you very much for fielding those. Well, we can't always cover them in the session. Emma, thank you once again for joining us, and to all of you out there, stay safe, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye all.